The year was 1987. Deep in the English countryside lay a remote village called Ravenscroft. Surrounded by dense forests and murky swamps, the village was shrouded in an eerie mist almost all year round. The air always felt heavy, neither too cold nor too warm, but filled with an unsettling presence. Daniel Woods, a 28-year-old historian, arrived in Ravenscroft with his girlfriend, Emily Brown. He had rented an old manor on the outskirts of the village to research its dark past. The villagers warned him against staying there, calling the place cursed, but Daniel dismissed their fears as mere superstition. As they stepped inside the house, an unsettling chill greeted them. The walls were adorned with faded portraits of unknown people whose hollow eyes seemed to follow them. A musty, decaying smell lingered in the air, as if the house had been abandoned for centuries. "It's just an old house," Daniel reassured himself. But Emily wasn't convinced. The first night, strange things began to happen. At midnight, Daniel was awakened by a faint knocking at the door. He ignored it at first, but then he heard it again, this time accompanied by a whisper. "You shouldn't be here. Leave while you can." His heart pounded as he hesitated before opening the door. But when he did, there was nothing. The hallway was empty, and the cold mist outside had thickened. The next morning, Emily woke up with deep scratches on her arms, as if someone or something had grabbed her during the night. But there was no explanation. "This place isn't right, Daniel," she said, her voice trembling. "We need to leave." But Daniel was too fascinated by the mystery to back out now. Determined to uncover the truth, Daniel delved into the village's archives. What he found sent a chill down his spine. The manor once belonged to a woman named Elizabeth Croft, accused of witchcraft in the 1600s. The villagers had burned her alive, believing she had cursed them. Ever since her death, strange disappearances and madness plagued anyone who lived in her house. Daniel rushed back to tell Emily, but she had already made up her mind. They needed to leave immediately, but it was too late. That night, the disturbances escalated. Doors slammed shut on their own, shadows flickered across the walls, and heavy footsteps echoed through the halls. The temperature plummeted, and a foul stench filled the air. Emily was in the bathroom when she noticed something terrifying in the mirror. A charred figure with hollow, blood-red eyes staring at her from behind. She screamed, but the door slammed shut on its own. Bloodstains began appearing on the floor, seeping through the wooden planks. Daniel forced the door open and found Emily unconscious on the floor. Her pulse was weak. Panicked, Daniel sought out the village elder, who revealed the darkest truth of all. Elizabeth's curse claimed anyone who stayed in her house for more than 7 nights. Daniel and Emily had been there for 5. Without wasting a second, Daniel dragged Emily to the car, but the engine refused to start. As he turned to look at the house, he saw her. Elizabeth's ghost stood at the window, watching them. Her face was burned beyond recognition. Her hands were charred, holding what looked like pieces of human flesh. She moved closer. Daniel grabbed Emily and ran. As they crossed the village's boundary, a deafening scream filled the air. And then, silence. Back in the city, things should have been normal, but they weren't. Emily began whispering in her sleep, "I haven't forgiven you." Daniel started seeing Elizabeth's reflection in mirrors, lurking in the shadows. One night, as Daniel sat in his dimly lit room, the lights flickered and went out. In the darkness, a whisper echoed, The next morning, Daniel was found dead in his room. His neck bore the marks of invisible hands. A year after Daniel Woods' mysterious death, the case remained unsolved. His girlfriend, Emily Brown, was admitted to a psychiatric hospital, unable to speak of what she had witnessed. The manor in Ravenscroft was abandoned once again, but villagers reported seeing a shadowy figure lurking in the windows at night. Some even heard whispers carried by the wind. You cannot escape. Despite the warnings, a new group of people arrived at Ravenscroft, unaware of the horror that awaited them. In 1988, a team of 3 paranormal investigators, James Carter, Olivia Reed, and Mark Dawson, set out to investigate the house where Daniel had died. They had heard of the manor's dark history and wanted to capture evidence of the supernatural. This place is legendary, James said as they approached the house. If we can document real paranormal activity, we'll make history. Olivia hesitated. Some things should stay buried, James. This place doesn't feel right. Mark, the skeptic of the group, scoffed. Ghosts don't exist. But if this gets us famous, I'm all in. They entered the house with their cameras, voice recorders, and electromagnetic field EMF detectors. But as soon as the door closed behind them, the temperature dropped drastically. The air was thick, almost suffocating. The house felt alive. That night, as they set up their equipment, the disturbances began. 2:30 a.m. Olivia heard whispering in her ear, "You shouldn't be here." 2:45 a.m. James saw a shadow move across the hallway, but when he checked, no one was there. 3 a.m. Mark's camera captured a burnt face staring at him from a mirror, but when he turned around, the room was empty. Then, suddenly, a loud bang. The front door slammed shut, locking them inside. Their radio equipment crackled, and a distorted voice whispered, "No one escapes." Olivia screamed as something invisible grabbed her by the hair, dragging her across the floor. James and Mark rushed to help, but a powerful force threw them back. On the ceiling, bloody words appeared. Daniel never left. The investigators were now desperate to leave. James tried breaking a window, but it wouldn't shatter. Mark kicked the door repeatedly, but it wouldn't budge. Olivia, trembling, whispered, "We need to finish what Daniel started. We have to find out the truth." They split up to search the house. Big mistake. James's encounter. James wandered into the basement, flashlight flickering. The deeper he went, the colder it became. Suddenly, he heard footsteps behind him. He turned. Nothing. Then, from the darkness, a burnt hand grabbed his wrist. He screamed as he was yanked into the shadows. The last thing his camera recorded was a pair of glowing red eyes staring into the lens. Mark's fate. Mark ran upstairs, but every door led him back to the same hallway. He heard Emily's voice, whispering, "Help me." Terrified, he entered a room where an old mirror stood. His own reflection smiled at him, but he wasn't smiling. Then, his reflection stepped out of the mirror. The real Mark tried to scream, but the doppelganger grabbed him and pulled him into the glass, trapping him inside. Olivia's discovery. Olivia, now alone, found Daniel's old journal in the attic. Inside, he had scribbled one final message. Elizabeth's curse binds souls to this house. No one truly leaves. Destroy the mirror. It's the key. She turned, and there stood Elizabeth's ghost, charred, eyes hollow, her mouth twisted into a smile. Join them, the ghost whispered. Olivia grabbed a metal rod and ran to the room where Mark had disappeared. The mirror shimmered, showing trapped souls inside. Daniel, Mark, and countless others, screaming for help. Without hesitation, she smashed the mirror. A blood-curdling scream filled the house as the glass shattered. A violent wind howled through the manor, and the spirits were released. The door burst open, and Olivia ran out, never looking back. Days later, Olivia recounted everything to the police, but no bodies were found. The manor was sealed, and the village was abandoned soon after. But Olivia was never the same. She saw shadows in the corners of her room. She heard whispers in the night, and one evening, in her bathroom mirror, Mark's reflection stared back at her. A cold whisper echoed through the room. No one escapes. The lights flickered, and then Olivia screamed. The lighter trembled in Olivia's hands. In front of her, Elizabeth's spirit was burning with rage. The walls of the mansion trembled with the tormented screams of countless trapped souls. If this mansion doesn't exist, neither will the curse. With this thought, Olivia set fire to the old curtains. Within seconds, the flames spread, consuming everything in their path. Elizabeth's ghost let out a blood-curdling scream. "You cannot destroy this. The curse will never end." But it was too late. The mansion's ceilings cracked, the floorboards crumbled, and from the walls, shadowy figures began to emerge, their faces twisted in agony. Olivia knew that if she didn't escape now, she would become part of this house forever. She ran toward the door, but suddenly she saw Mark, James, and Daniel's spirits. Their eyes were hollow, their expressions lost in the abyss. "Olivia, you are one of us now," James's ghost whispered. "You cannot leave," Mark's voice echoed. Daniel's spirit looked at her and softly said, "But you can set us free." Olivia hesitated. Was there any way to truly end this nightmare? And then, a chilling voice filled the air. "You will never escape this place." The fire raged, devouring everything. The mansion trembled like a beast in its final moments. Summoning every ounce of strength, Olivia sprinted toward the door. She pulled it open, and the moment she stepped outside, the entire mansion collapsed in a thunderous explosion. The villagers stood at a distance, watching the burning ruins. The screams of spirits still echoed in the wind. But Olivia was nowhere to be found. By dawn, the villagers searched the ashes. The mansion was completely destroyed. But there was no sign of Olivia. Some say she freed the trapped souls and escaped. Others believe she perished along with the house. But weeks later, a villager saw a shadow move inside his mirror. And then, a burnt, whispering voice came from the glass. "No one can escape the curse." Screen fades to black. A distant, eerie scream echoes. The story ends.